All right, folks. So let's get into this idea of money in campaigns and elections fairly quick like. And let me give you a little bit of some court cases here, but I'm also going to show you some sample ads to kind of give you some things to think about as well. And you'll notice I've got this set up here as money, 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 for Roman numeral number two. And you'll notice these top two cases up here. One of them is Citizens United versus Federal Elections Commission, the FEC. And then the other one is McCutcheon versus Federal Elections Commission or the FEC. And these are really within the context of many of y'all's lifetimes. Citizens United was a big one. And the idea behind this is there have traditionally been limits on the amount of money that, say, an individual person, a business, a labor union could actually contribute to candidates. Okay. There traditionally were limits on how they could impact elections. Well, in Citizens United, the Supreme Court actually came out and said that spending money in the context of an election is an example of free speech under the First Amendment. So, as such, it needs to be protected. And basically, what they said here was that richer groups, corporations, businesses, labor unions, and eventually we're going to get to individuals, they really struck down many of the limitations for the ability of these groups to be able to contribute to elections. Now, you might be saying here, okay, how does this impact me or how does this impact an election? All right, I'm going to think about how I was when I was a freshman or a sophomore in college, which I suspect many of y'all are. Okay, I didn't have a lot of money to be able to contribute to an election. I didn't have a lot of money to put gas in my car, you know? So I sure as hell wasn't going to be contributing to elections. Now, I bring this up to you because if you are a voter and you vote maybe once every year or every 2 years or every 4 years or every 6 years, whatever it is, as far as the time frame for the election, well, that means that maybe these elected officials are going to be really thinking about you that once a year, once every 2 years, once every four, once every six, whatever it is. Okay, but if you're an interest group, if you're a business, if you're a corporation or a labor union, and you can contribute significant amounts of money to a political party or to individual candidates, or you could contribute to all of the people that are running for office, say from a particular political party, well, it stands to reason that they're going to pay a lot more attention to you once they get into office. And it also stands to reason that not only are they going to pay more attention to the corporation, the labor union, the whatever, but it also stands to reason that even though we, the people, are the votes that get people into office, you could make the argument corporations providing the money are allowing people to stay there. As long as that money keeps coming, well, the elected officials are going to do whatever it takes to keep that money coming so that they can continue to stay in office. So again, we, the people, kind of getting forgotten. We're kind of getting pushed off to the side. Citizens United was the first time, and this is only about 15 years ago, where the Supreme Court said that money in elections was a form of free speech. And in fact, they struck down an awful lot of the limitations that deal with the ability of these corporations and interest groups and labor unions and whatnot to be able to contribute. Now, the McCutcheon case, which is closer to about 10 years ago, this was actually an individual. This was actually an individual who didn't like the fact that they could only contribute a limited amount. And they as well, McCutcheon sued, and McCutcheon won as well. Now, this is not to say that you could just write this $1 million check to a candidate. But basically, what it's saying is that you can contribute to candidates, you can contribute to political action committees, you can contribute to the political party, you can contribute to people that you can't even vote for. In other words, as an individual, you could just keep writing checks. And the text makes mention of this. If you actually contributed, to everybody that was running for federal office, say of a political party, you could actually contribute over $3 million. Now, I can't write that kind of a check. I will never be able to write that kind of check. But even if I was, I wouldn't write that kind of a check. And I bring this up to you because if many of y'all can't write this kind of a check either, who do you think is going to get more attention? Is it going to be the check writers or is it going to be we, the people that are the voters? Kind of stands to reason that the check writers are going to get more attention than we will, although we will get attention election time, which is only once every year, once every 2 years, once every 4 years, once every 6 years, depending upon what the office is. Now, I want to give you this quote from Mick Mulvaney, and this is actually from the very top of page 300 and maybe even the very bottom of page 299. It says down here, and it starts on 299, big donors confidently chuckle that they are buying a seat at the table. They can always get in the door to talk to elected officials. In other words, if you're writing the big checks, whether it's a result of Citizens United or whether it's a result of that McCutcheon case, you get your seat at the table because the politicians are going to drop things in order to see you, in order to make sure that those checks keep coming. Mick Mulvaney, the White House Chief of Staff and Director of the Office of Management and Budget in the first Trump administration, put it bluntly when he was in Congress saying, if you're a lobbyist who never gave us money, I didn't talk to you. Think about that for just a second. Holy cow. If you're a lobbyist, if you never gave us money, I wouldn't talk to you. And that means that many of us, we the people, don't give a significant amount of money, if we give any money at all. Are we really getting the representation that we need? Or are we getting the best representation that money bought us? And if we didn't give any money, then we really didn't get any representation. It's something to think about. Let me show you a quick clip. And this is a video, a movie back from the days when I was in college back at East Carolina. And this one that I'm going to show you is actually an old Eddie Murphy clip from the movie The Distinguished Gentleman. Now, when you take a look at this clip, and bear with me as I juggle my screens here for just a second, but when you take a look at this clip, Murphy in the movie is actually a character who is running for office. He's somebody that's gotten into trouble with the law. He's kind of a little bit of a scam artist, if you will. And as you look at this, basically what you're going to see is he gets elected in kind of an upset sort of a way. I'm going to show you a little bit more about that in this next video. But for this one right now, he's actually talking to an attorney who is a lobbyist. And bear with me here. I think I've got to activate the sound on this. This is only about a minute clip. But this probably, it was a satire, it's supposed to be a comedy. But to be honest with you, there's a degree of truth to this, especially when you put this into the context.
I'd like to do more money for you, but first I've got to get your...
Mick Mulvaney's quote that I just read. Of course, Eddie Murphy on the left, the attorney, the interest group, the lobbyist on the right, Eddie Murphy, a congressman, and I'll just let you listen to this interaction.
More money for you. But first, I've got to get your positions on a few issues. Now, where are you on sugar price supports?
Sugar price supports? Where should I be, Terry?
Shit, it makes no difference to me. If you're for them, I got money for you from my sugar producers in Louisiana and Hawaii. If you're against them, I got money for you from the candy manufacturers.
You pick.
Let's say 4.
Yeah, 4.
How about putting limits on malpractice awards?
Well, you tell me.
Well, if you're for them, I got money from the doctors and insurance companies. If you're against them, I got money from the trial lawyers. Let's put you down as against.
Yeah, you know what? Put me down for against.
How about pizza?
Oh, no, this salad's gonna be enough for me.
Not for lunch, old buddy. For pack money.
You thought I was serious? I was fucking with you.
Well, you are.
Fucking with you. I'll go. Terry, tell me something. With all this money coming in from both sides, how could anything possibly ever get done?
It doesn't. That's the genius of the system.
You know, y'all, as you look at this, and we were talking about this a couple of minutes ago in the earlier video, and I had mentioned to you the idea, bear with me as I juggle my screens here for just a second, but I had mentioned to you the idea that when there are so many candidates that are on the ballot, you just can't know everything. And if you can't know everything, then it stands to reason that you're going to make some mistakes when you vote. Well, this quote or this little scene between Kerry and Eddie Murphy. Basically, who's running this? It sure seems like it's the lobbyist. It sure seems like it's the attorney. It sure seems like it's the guy who is providing the money. And if you look at it, you know, the hardest thing we can do sometimes is say, I don't know. Eddie Murphy's not saying, I don't know. What do you pick? Where should I be? What do you think? And who ultimately is making the decision? Well, it's not the person that we voted for, but it's somebody that we never ever get the chance to vote for. And y'all, that's kind of a problem, right? I mean, that's really a problem. And that's the danger of getting too much money into the systems. Now, a couple of other things here to think about for just a second as well. He doesn't know all these issues. He doesn't know them. And oftentimes elected officials are going to get their information from these interest groups, from these political action committees. They're going to be getting some information that's truthful, but it's going to have at least some slant to it, and it's going to leave off some things maybe that aren't as flattering. And I bring this up to you because, again, are the elected officials thinking about we, the people, on their daily times in the Congress, their daily committee meetings, their votes, whatever? Or are they going to be thinking about the folks that are writing these checks? Because they're going to see them around the Congress on a daily, weekly basis. But they're not going to see us maybe ever. And they're going to be thinking about us at election time, which is a little bit different than legislation time. Now, the other piece on this, and you notice that thing that he said at the end, which is the most damning. The genius of the system is nothing ever gets done. You know, he's basically laying out in that clip, hey, if you're in favor of a particular issue, you know what? I'll give you money. Whether this group will give you money to be in favor. And if you're against, well, you know what? This group is going to give you money to stay against. In other words, no matter what you pick, you're going to be able to get paid. Well, if you're dealing with the doctors versus the lawyers, which are going to be highly educated, very wealthy groups organizing against each other, nothing is ever going to get done because they're both so well funded and so well organized that ultimately neither side is going to get what they want. They're basically just fighting to make sure that the other side doesn't get something that, in fact, they don't want the other side to get. No matter where you pick, the money is going to be there, in other words, and that's kind of dangerous. And you know, sometimes it's really hard to pin down an elected official on what their position is. Why? Because if they say yes, they're going to get money from the groups that want them to vote a certain way. If they say no, they're going to get money from certain groups that don't want them to vote a certain way. But if they don't say anything at all, then they're going to get money from both sides trying to convince them to vote for their particular cause. So this is part of the reason that the system works the way that it does. Now, let me give you a couple of other things in here in terms of how much. How much can you actually donate? Well, the laws right now say that you can donate $3,300 to a candidate. Now, the text says $6,600, and that's true. It's $3,300 for a primary election and another $3,300 for a general election. So it adds up to $6,600, but you can give up to $3,300 per election for people that you're supporting. Now, if you want to give to a PAC, you can actually give $5,000. Now, the difference here is if you give something to a candidate, it goes directly to the candidate, and then they've got complete control over how it is that they spend that money. If you give it to a PAC, it's not just that you're giving, you know, $5,000, but there are going to be dozens or hundreds or thousands of other people that are giving $5,000, which means, hey, I can write a $5,000 check. It's wonderful. But, you know, if I have thousands of people writing a $5,000 check, now all of a sudden that campaign is going to pay more attention to the things that I want because that's a hell of a lot of money. Now, you're going to notice up here the third thing, unlimited number of candidates and PACs. Now, understand on this. This is the McCutcheon case again. And the McCutcheon case, basically what they said was that you didn't have to stop if you just wanted to donate to the people that you could vote for. But in fact, you could donate to every single Republican or every single Democratic candidate that's running for the Congress, which means you can actually give not just thousands of dollars, but you could give millions of dollars if you had that amount to be able to contribute. So kind of keep that thought in mind. Now, the other thing that came out of this are the super PACs. Now, the super PACs do not, wink, wink, coordinate with the candidates. You can actually give unlimited amounts of money to the super PACs, y'all. You can give unlimited amounts of money to the super PACs. Why? Because they don't coordinate with the candidate, wink, wink. But in fact, they spend the money in ways that would be flattering to a candidate, or they would spend money in ways that in fact would attack an opponent. Now, one more thing that's in this, and it's the 527 groups. And y'all, the 527 groups are issue advocacy groups. So they don't coordinate with candidates and campaign. They don't say vote for so and so or not vote for so and so, but they advocate a certain issue. They advocate a certain issue. Now, let me show you some examples of this, and let me show you an example of an issue advocacy ad. And again, this is one you can give a hell of a lot of money to. Bear with me as I juggle my screens here for just a second. And I'm going to show you something. And this ad is actually going to be for soda. Now, if you've watched any of my videos, inevitably you're going to see me at some point pick up some kind of a soda to get a drink, right? I mean, I think you've seen this a reasonable amount in these videos, or if you're just starting, you're going to see it as you go forward. Well, I bring this up to you because soda is a big issue. And there are some folks that would say that sugar levels and caffeine, especially in kids at schools, it negatively impacts behavior, which negatively impacts learning, these kinds of things. There are campaigns to ban soda from schools. There are campaigns, y'all, to highly or more highly tax soda so that, in fact, again, people would drink less of it, theoretically leading maybe to some health benefits. Now, I think really they're trying to raise money, these states are, to be able to pay for their budgets. But, hey, if you drink less soda, you're healthier. You see where I'm going with this. Let me run this ad for you. And this is actually it's an issue advocacy, and it is fighting this idea where these local governments are trying to establish these soda taxes. Let me double check and make sure that I've got the sound up on this. And I do. And let's roll it.
Well, we're here at Pioneer Supermarket in the Bronx. When I heard that they wanted to implement a tax on juice drinks and the sodas, this is another way to get into our pockets. But you know what? In these type of communities, it all adds up. With my customers, when they come to shop, the majority of them bring notepads and calculators because they're working on a budget. New Yorkers cannot afford another tax. On behalf of myself and everybody in New York, that this tax is only gonna hurt.
You notice down there, y'all, it said that this was paid for by the American Beverage Association. And did you notice in there they didn't mention any candidates' names? Did you notice in there that they didn't mention voting in any way? They're basically just issue advocacy, no tax on soda. And you'll see this from coal miners. You'll see this from the fossil fuel gas and oil industry. You'll see this for grocery prices. And I mean, there are all sorts of groups that are out there that are basically trying to reach out to Joe and Jane Sixpack so that they will put some pressure on the elected officials so that the elected officials will leave them alone. Leave alone whoever this advocacy group is, in this instance, to kill the tax. And you notice in there they make an appeal to regular people with regular grocery bills, a regular grocery store manager. You see all of this in there. I mean, it's designed to connect, and it's designed to connect from a New York perspective. Maybe there would be different people in the Oklahoma ad, but I suspect that impacting or trying to target the economics of it are really what they're trying to do. Now, let me show you a couple of actual campaign ads. This first one that I'm going to show you is maybe the most famous or infamous ad in American history. And this one, y'all, is known as the Daisy ad. Lyndon Johnson was running for president, a Democrat. He was running against a Republican, Barry Goldwater. And Barry Goldwater, y'all, was somebody who actually suggested that maybe we could use nuclear weapons and it not turn into a nuclear all out war. Okay. Now, I'm not going to get into the semantics of, hey, that's possible. Hey, that's not possible. I just want to focus on this ad because in this ad, well, let me just run it because Johnson really doesn't mention a lot of things, but the graphics of it are something that really raised an awful lot of attention in this election, and it overwhelmingly won for Lyndon Johnson. Bear with me as I juggle my screens here for just a second. Let me pull up the oops, the Daisy ad. And here we go. This is from the 60s.
From the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C.
One, two, three, four, five, seven, six, eight, nine,
10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. These are the stakes. To make a world in which all of God's children can live, or to go into the dark. We must either love each other, or we must die.
Vote for President Johnson on November 3rd. The stakes are too high for you to stay home.
Y'all, as I get back into this for just a second, and we're talking about campaign ads. I mean, here you've got the sitting president of the United States running for reelection, and he nukes a child in a campaign ad. And like I said, he was running against somebody who was basically saying, "Oh, we should be able to use nukes, and it's not going to end in some nuclear catastrophe." Well, he's saying we can't afford to take that chance. And when you watch this ad, it was very simple. They only ran it one time. The news media covered it incredibly. Lyndon Johnson won in a landslide in this particular election. This was from what, 1964, I guess. And I bring this up to you. This is craziness. I mean, he nuked a little girl. But you notice in there at the end, it said, vote for President Johnson. You notice in there, the speaker was President Johnson. It's different than an issue advocacy ad because you don't hear anything from the candidate. Now, one other thing that you'll notice, and you'll notice this more probably next year when the congressional elections start, is somewhere in the ad, there oftentimes now will be something that says, I am Donald J. Trump and I support this advertisement. You know, they'll actually come out and say it. That means that this is an ad that's coming from the candidate, and this is the $3,300 that you could contribute directly to a candidate. Sometimes there will be ads that address a candidate, but it will not have the candidate speaking. And then just like in that American Beverage Association ad, at the end, it will say, this ad was paid for by such and such and such and such. In other words, it wasn't the actual candidate who was responsible for the content, and the candidate didn't spend the money for this. So this is a way for the candidate maybe to be a little bit bolder in some of the things that they say or some of the attacks that they make without having to take responsibility because this ad was technically done by somebody else. Now, I just gave you one of the most infamous or famous ads in American history. Let me give you one of the sleaziest ads. I suspect that maybe some of y'all have heard of Jerry Springer, right? Yeah, that one. Jerry Springer. Jerry Springer, this is the guy, and bear with me as I juggle my screens here for just a second. Jerry Springer on TV. Well, Jerry Springer actually ran for public office in Ohio. And he was this was in the Cincinnati area. I think he was running for governor. I get this confused sometimes, but I'll go ahead and run this ad and look what the ad that Jerry Springer ran. And maybe it won't surprise you as you see this that in fact he lost. Let me pull this one up. This is Jerry Springer. This is from almost 40 years ago now. And wow, yeah, Springer for governor. Here we go. Yeah, here we go.
It's been 2 years now since I first said, I'm Jerry Springer and I want to be your governor. Now, after sharing some specific solutions for our unemployment and education problems in this state, it looks like the nomination is finally within grasp, which makes what I'm about to tell you even more difficult. Some 9 years ago, I spent time with a woman I shouldn't have, and I paid her with a check. I wish I hadn't done that, and the truth is, I wish no one would ever know. But in the rough world of politics, opponents are not about to let personal embarrassments lay to rest. Perhaps like you, I'm not sure what any of this has to do with being governor, but maybe my talking to you about this makes a point. Ohio is in a world of hurt. The next governor is going to have to take some heavy risks and face some hard truths. I'm prepared to do that. This commercial should be proof. I'm not afraid, even of the truth, and even if it hurts. Come on, join me on June 8th. We're going to turn the state around.
Jerry Springer, Democrat for governor.
Okay, if you're wondering, Jerry Springer evidently got a prostitute, and he paid the prostitute with a check, and the check came up in the middle of an election campaign. And this, as you might would imagine, cost him the election. Now, I will say this, pretty gutsy kind of a thing, getting up there and saying, hey, listen, I made a mistake. Now, what's funny is if you really listen to the ad, is he saying he made a mistake by soliciting the prostitute? Because it really sounds like he's saying, made a mistake by paying the prostitute with a check so that you could catch me on this. Y'all pay attention to the ads. Sometimes they're pretty funny. Sometimes they're pretty stupid. Sometimes they really do actually have some good information in there. But again, you'll notice it said at the very beginning of his ad, hey, this was his campaign that was doing this. It listed his treasurer's name, who is responsible for the money. And they kind of low key throw this stuff in, right? It'll be the words paid for by such and such and such and such. Or maybe it'll just be, hey, I am so and so, and I'm responsible for the content of this ad. But make sure you know where it's coming from, because sometimes that can impact things too. Y'all, I will close this one and come back with one more little piece about elections, and then we'll go from there. Bye for now.